Ladies and gentlemen, we gotta talk about this 3-liter Duramax. This engine is probably one of the best in the full-size SUV and pickup truck segment, but there is a catch. But before we go over that, I did borrow this truck from Jerry Seiner, Buick GMC here in South Jordan, Utah. Be sure to ask for Frank, it is available for sale, and you guys can see it is an AT4. Let's quickly go over the window sticker so you guys can see some of the specs if you're interested. At the very top is a description with the colors. And then here's a short listing of the equipment. Now notice how they show you what configuration this is. I don't think that Ford, or actually Ford does, they show you the wheelbase, but sometimes people can't decipher which is which. But I don't think Ram shows you whether it's short box or standard box. Base price comes in at $66,800. And then this one has the AT4 premium package, technology package, sunroof, and it has the territory tires for $95 extra, Total price is $71,655, and then here are the fuel economy numbers. So here's a question. What other internal combustion engine can get the kind of fuel economy that this truck has? And I'm talking specifically about the highway. Now, keep this in mind. GM is one of the few manufacturers that do give you fuel economy for different trim levels. So in other words, this being an AT4, it is lifted, 2 inches? It also has more aggressive tires, and this one does not have the front valance either. So those things are going to affect the fuel economy, right? So the 24 highway, 21 city is specifically for this truck, but if you do get a elevation or a Denali trim, that fuel economy is going to be higher on those trucks. Now, with that being said, this 3-liter Duramax was updated back in 2022. They had the LM2, and then they switched over to this LZO. It's pretty safe to say that GM is #1 when it comes down to giving you options. No other manufacturer offers a diesel for their half tons and full-size SUVs. And this 3-liter inline-6 engine is really probably the only engine I would probably buy from GM right now, personally. Now, one thing I like about this engine is it does use a cast aluminum engine block, and they do have the press-in iron cylinder liners, which is going to help with wear protection. Obviously, using cast aluminum is going to help with weight. Also, Denso HP5 injection pump, so reliability is there 100%. Also, new steel piston design. Compression ratio was increased to 15.2 to 1. Thicker cylinder head gasket design, which I think was probably an issue on the LM2. And I mentioned has better fuel injection on this one, and I would say more reliable. That's probably the best way to put it. They did revise the turbocharger, compressor geometry, new water pump, revised cooling in this engine too. So if you're someone that's planning on towing heavy, yes, this engine is probably going to be your best bet, especially in these higher elevations, because you know these turbocharged engines just do better at these 4,000 plus feet elevations for sure. Now behind this engine is a 10-speed transmission and 305 horsepower and 495 pound-feet of torque. I can go on and on about how great this engine is and why it's better than the 5.3 and the Turbomax. I could even make a point that it's better than the 6.2 off the line. But here's what you have to understand. Obviously, everything has pros and cons, and this diesel is no exception. We can talk about emissions control, but we're gonna skip that because we already know that that is a huge negative with these diesel engines. They are one of the worst because the manufacturers allow, never mind, I'm not going down that road. I told you I wouldn't do it, and I'm not gonna do it in this video. So here's 2 stories that are pretty much the same. I was at the Ram store and someone told me this story. You guys know Josh, and then Brian at GMC told me a very similar story. So let's talk about the diesel option. Obviously, you guys know when we talk about emissions, there is something called diesel exhaust fluid, known as DEF, whatever you want to call it. They have conveniently added that fill here. In the past, They added it for the 6.6 Duramaxes under the hood, and a lot of people complained. I used to sell GM trucks back in the day, and I remember so many guys that wanted to switch over to GM from a Ram or from a Ford said, why in the heck would they put the DEF fill here? Especially if you were someone that went to the truck stop and used their stuff. It was even worse because that stuff is messy and it just got everywhere. So I understood the beef. But then GM came to their senses and did what everyone else did. They decided to add their DEF fill right here. Now just notice how messy diesel exhaust fluid is. You do not want this stuff to get in here. So here's the story. Guy's at the fuel station and he needs to get DEF. Well, he opens up this fuel door. Somehow, miraculously, he sees this where he normally goes to put his diesel. And somehow he misses this that says DEF. He decides to put the DEF here. I guess he thought that maybe the truck would know better and say, oh, by the way, this is DEF, it's gonna go into this side. But no, he put the DEF there and of course it went into the tank. Now, unfortunately, once you do that, even if you put just a drip of DEF in that system, you cannot drive that truck. As soon as you start that engine, you have destroyed your fuel system. And the only reason why I'm doing this video is because it happened again. And sadly, I do believe that GM did it right the first time, because obviously they knew, just like Volkswagen, because remember before the Dieselgate with Volkswagen used to actually have the DEF fill, I believe, under the floor in the trunk, which was very inconvenient. And that's kind of why I'm doing this video, because believe it or not, even though if you were to walk up to this fuel door here, I don't know, maybe people are just in a rush, or maybe people were just on social media too much and they're just not thinking. Whatever the case is, you can clearly tell that that says DEF, add blue, and normally a green cap would indicate that this is diesel because you bought a diesel truck, so you would know that putting diesel there makes more sense than putting DEF. But somehow, some way, people keep making this mistake. So here's some recommendations for you. Because you're probably going to get, unless you're towing, this is a little different, and depending on the climate that you live in, this could be different. You can probably get 500 to 600 miles to a gallon on your DEF system. So reality is, you don't necessarily have to fill up DEF every month unless you're towing. If you're someone that tows often, yes, you probably could go every month topping off that system. But in a lot of cases, a lot of people do not really understand just how sensitive the DEF system is. Therefore, if you're someone who's just not knowledgeable about these systems, it's going to cost you $20,000 to get your fuel system replaced. And even if your insurance company is willing to pay it, why would you want to claim something like that under your insurance? This is very easy to do. Now, I get it. Sometimes if you're in a rush and you're not paying attention, it's easy to make mistakes. I make mistakes all the time. But that is one mistake I could never make, because it is not a cheap one. So if you're someone who wants to buy this truck and you're not really familiar with diesel engines, I would recommend you allow your dealership to do this for you. And I know this is crazy. I know some of you guys are like, man, that's crazy. Like, they're going to charge you. No. Some dealers will just charge you the cost of the diesel exhaust fluid, and then they will fill it because they normally have the jugs in the back anyways. So if you're not someone who's competent enough, or maybe you just don't want to deal with this nasty stuff, like this stuff is nasty. This truck is brand new, and my goodness, look at this. Like, this is disgusting. And you cannot top off these systems because they're so sensitive. So you have to be very careful with this. So my recommendation is, if you want to get this diesel option, you're going to have to slow down, or just let your dealer do your DEF top off. Because if you damage the system, because even if I told you, well, if you saw that you did it, just don't start the truck, because that's obviously what you don't do. If you do catch that you put diesel exhaust fluid in your diesel tank. Don't start the truck because you're in luck. Because most people don't know this. I'll be honest, I didn't know this. There is a return. So when the fuel does go through, right, it does have a return back into the fuel tank. So unfortunately, it's instant. As soon as you start the engine, that fuel is going through the system, which means that DEF is going through the diesel system. It's going to take out your expensive diesel fuel pump and injectors. And injectors can be $1,500 to $2,000 per injector, right? Inline 6 engine, so you're kind of in luck versus a V8. But nevertheless, this is the biggest, I think, negative to owning a diesel truck, especially for these half tons and full size SUVs, because if you're not familiar with this system, it can cost you dearly. So again, take your time, and my recommendation is, if you're not competent enough to do it, take it to your dealership and let them top off your DEF system. Now, I have done some videos on the AT4 for 2025. I just pulled this truck because it had the diesel option, but I want to show you the numbers on the door just because that's what I always do. So you guys see the gross axle weight readings, 3,800 pounds front and rear, 7,200 pound gross vehicle weight rating, so it's 100 pounds higher because of the diesel option, 20/9 wheels, and then all in payload is actually decent, 1,432 pounds. This truck weighs 5,768 pounds on the curb. It can tow 8,900 pounds conventionally. And gross combined weight rating is 15,000 pounds. 41 PSI all the way around for the tires. If you would like to buy this truck, and if you buy any vehicle from Jerry Seiner because of my videos, be sure to let them know. Ask for Frank. He's the guy I normally work with. But if you do buy, just let them know, because it goes a long way. Like, these guys let me do videos all the time, and it's just nice to let them know when people are coming in and buying cars, because it doesn't just help me, it helps them as well. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Is there anything else about buying the diesel that's a negative? I know that someone's going to bring up the oil pump. It's a rubber oil pump belt, and it is internal, and it is a big job if you have to get it repaired. Or it's actually not even a repair, it's actually a maintenance item that you have to do. I think it's every 200,000 miles, but Brian recommends you go, it might be 150 or 200, I can't remember now, but Brian recommends you do it at 100. He just says, honestly, like, even though they raised it, he says, I didn't really see a difference in the belt, so I just still tell people 100K too. But again, you can do whatever you want to do. But that's probably the other negative, because again, it is in a bad spot. I don't understand why manufacturers are doing those, you know, wet belts. It just doesn't make sense, especially with hot oil. Later.